Hey guys, welcome back to another video on F1 Hub, and in today's video we're going to rank every single F1 2024 full-time driver. So unfortunately that does mean no Oliver Bearman, but honourable mention, he probably would have been in the top 15. Before we get started, I'd really appreciate it if you would like and subscribe this video. It really helped me out, and also make sure you don't miss any of my future videos, including my season review so far of every F1 team so far. So let's go straight into it. And last place, Zhou Guanyu. He's had an awful season, and also just one more thing, I'm going to go through these pretty quick, so this video doesn't last for about 40 minutes. Zhou Guanyu's had a mediocre season. He's only out-qualified Valtteri Bottas once, which is actually disgraceful, and it was only in changeable conditions at the British Grand Prix, and apart from that, he's just been incredibly lacklustre. The same can be said for Logan Sargent, though he's generally been a bit better in sprint qualifying, out-qualifying Albon 2 times this year in that format. His main weakness is qualifying, though he is getting closer and closer. He's out of Williams next year, and I can't really see why anyone would want to keep him. He hasn't crashed as many times, but he's still off the pace and still hasn't scored many points. His highlights remain 11th at the British Grand Prix and his 10th in the Miami Sprint, but apart from that, it's another year for Logan Sargent where he's been unable to match Alex Albon, and he still hasn't scored points and hasn't helped the team. In 18th place is Sergio Perez. He's had a terrible year. It started off very promising, should I say, with two second place finishes in Bahrain and Saudi, followed by second in Japan and then third in China, and 66,000s off pole in Japan. Miami was still fine, finishing in P4 on a day where McLaren kind of stopped him from getting a podium, but since then he's been out in Q1. He's crashed in Monaco, he's crashed in Canada, he's crashed at the British Grand Prix, he's crashed at the Hungarian Grand Prix, and at Belgian Grand Prix did get on the front row. 17th place is Kevin Magnussen. He's one of my favourite F1 drivers, but he's been well and truly off Nico Hülkenberg's pace, regularly just being completely and utterly off the pace, being out in Q1 all the time pretty much. He scored some points, including 8th place at the Austrian Grand Prix and 10th at the Australian Grand Prix. Of course, that was assisted thanks to Verstappen's DNF, but was a good team player at the start of the year, with defending in Saudi and Miami being the highlight. Next up, Daniel Ricciardo. He's in 16th place. He's getting closer and closer to Yuki Tsunoda, but his abysmal early season turn was disgraceful. He was off in Saudi and Australia several times. He was just completely off the pace. He crashed in Japan, was in a good place in China and Miami, but was back to that usual slump before the Canada revival, and it was back down in Austrian Silverstone again. Then bringing us into the top 15 is Pierre Gasly. He's had a pretty dismal year too, really. I mean, he's been outperformed by Esteban Ocon, but at least he doesn't make mistakes, which is one of Pierre Gasly's good things. In the first couple of races, he was outpaced by Esteban Ocon, but it was very marginal and very unlucky in Bahrain and Saudi not to have out-qualified him. From there, though, he went into that dip of form when Ocon was regularly beating him, but then it went back to Gasly beating him for a couple of races. Then next up, Valtteri Bottas, one of the most underrated drivers of the year, in my opinion, completely and utterly destroyed Zhou Guanyu. He's pulled everything out of this car to try and get the points. He should have had points if it wasn't for Kick Sauber's awful pit stops and reliability issues. So obviously in Bahrain and Saudi, and especially the Australian, Japan and Chinese Grand Prix, all should have given a point. Then next up we have Esteban Ocon. He has been much quicker than Pierre Gasly this year, but there was that mid part of the first half of the year, like Spain and Canada, where he was getting beaten by his teammate. But he's always been up there, Esteban, but the thing is, he just doesn't work well with teammates. He crashed in Monaco with Pierre Gasly, and it just hasn't been a plain sailing year. Then next up, Alex Albon, great year, destroyed Sargent, but not as good as last year. He is by far another underrated driver. Yes, he's got half the points of Fernando, but he is far closer. And Fernando got all of these points when the car was at its most competitive. So, for example, Fernando got those early 5th place finishes in Saudi Arabia while Stroll crashed. The early start of the year wasn't great. Like I said, Stroll crashed in Saudi and the Chinese Grand Prix and was off form in Japan. But ever since, he's been beating Fernando Alonso. And for the first time ever, Lance Stroll deserves a seat in F1. Then we have Fernando Alonso. Okay, I was being too nice to Lance Stroll there. He doesn't deserve a seat. But Fernando Alonso himself has not had a great year. He kicked off amazingly, but once the car went away, so did he. He missed his last good form in Imola when the car was probably still competitive by going off into the gravel. And from there, he's just had an awful time of it, regularly getting beaten by Stroll, which isn't a good look. Running into the top 10 is Yuki Tsunoda. I had him into the top 6 at the start of the year, but I've put him back down because he's starting to get beaten by Daniel Ricciardo a bit more. But he's made a couple of mistakes, crashing in Hungary and then crashing in Canada, which the front runners don't really make that many mistakes, apart from Perez. So all in all, for Yuki Tsunoda, a very, very strong, consistent year. Another driver that had a bit further up is Nico Hülkenberg, but those two P6s do him a little too much. Nice to put him up there. In Bahrain, he caused a collision. In Saudi Arabia, was gifted a point. In Australia, Magnussen had to help him again. There has been times in those early 3 races where Magnussen was generally quicker than him, at least a couple of the time. But overall, Hülkenberg's had a stellar year, and he would nearly be ahead of Carlos Sainz. But let's just not forget, Carlos Sainz missed a race in Saudi. And Australia, he won the race. That early season form was absolutely sensational, though he has gone back off again before that. Spain, Austria, British Grand Prix run, and Hungary too, where he was out qualifying Charles Leclerc. Great run, but he has made a couple of mistakes, including crashing in Canada. Same can be said for Charles Leclerc. He's made a couple of mistakes. He went off in Austria somewhere, and there was just those races where he was generally getting beaten by Carlos Sainz. Though he has been impressive, he took pole position at the Belgian Grand Prix, and his dominant win at the Monaco Grand Prix is one of the highlights for Charles Leclerc's season, and he's getting the best out of a car that is no longer one of the best, and no longer a car that can fight for the podium places. Then you have Lewis Hamilton. Judged on the first 8 races, he was definitely not in my top 10, and I was going to put him in my top 5 worst drivers because he was well off form. But let's just not forget, ever since the Spanish Grand Prix, Lewis Hamilton, I asked on one of my polls, and people were agreeing, 53% Lewis Hamilton has been better than Russell since Spain, and it's completely true. The win at the British Grand Prix and the win in the Belgian Grand Prix have been highlights. George Russell's ahead though because he got the best out of a car that was not that great, but he did crash at the Australian Grand Prix and has just made mistakes when conditions have been in the rain. For example, in China he was knocked out in Q2 in the sprint. At the British Grand Prix, he could not match Lewis Hamilton. At the Belgian Grand Prix, he couldn't match Lewis Hamilton until he did that audacious one-stop strategy to win, which is incredible, but it does take away from Lewis Hamilton's performance. But otherwise, great season. Next up is Oscar Piastri, even though it has a picture of Lando Norris. I'm going for Lando Norris, in fact. Yeah, I'll go for Lando Norris in third. He's made too many mistakes on lap 1. His pace has been impressive. He's been incredibly consistent, but he's just made far too many mistakes, Lando Norris. Lando Norris should have had at least 5 wins this year, and he's bottled every single one, especially on the last lap, including the China Sprint, the Spanish Grand Prix, the Hungarian Grand Prix. So that means in second place is Oscar Piastri. I wasn't going to put him ahead, but I've just changed my mind very last minute. Oscar Piastri is going to be in second place because he's just had an impressive year. He was beating Lando Norris in the early season races and probably could have beaten him in Australia too, but this late bit of form has been impressive. He should have beaten him at the British Grand Prix, did beat him at the Hungarian Grand Prix, and did beat him at the Belgian Grand Prix. He's getting much quicker, but in first place is Max Verstappen, but he's not a clean 10 out of 10 for me. I would give him more 9 out of 10. He crashed in Monaco, he collided with Norris in Austria and Hamilton at the Hungarian Grand Prix, but apart from that, he is literally lifting Red Bull beyond where Sergio Perez is going. He has basically given Red Bull the championship here, but McLaren's are closing in, and I would be surprised if they didn't win the Constructors. Not Max's best year in F1, his worst I think since 2021, and definitely, yeah, probably one of his worst seasons in F1 in terms of mistakes, but he's still been absolutely incredible, which just shows how good of a driver he is. So thank you so much for watching. Let me know your opinion in the comments below, and I'll see you next time.